Hey there. Good morning. So, I discovered neuroscience and attachment theory probably 15 years ago, and I was immediately hooked. So, when I first got started in mental health way back in 1990 when I went for my master's degree in social work, I discovered this amazing theory called family systems theory. And I am not going to lie, I was like a new convert to Christianity, spreading the gospel of therapy far and wide. I I immediately resonated with family systems theory because I always wanted to work with children and adolescents. That was always my focus. And back then, what struck me the most was understanding children within the context of their family system, and even Bowen family systems theory, looking at the family system generationally. So then fast forward, that's my foundation. I was lucky enough in grad school that was my whole specialization year, was children and families and getting really grounded in family systems theory. And then fast forward a few years, I'm in private practice, I'm licensed, I'm working with children and adolescents using play therapy, and I discover this thing called neuroscience. And it was right around the time Daniel Siegel was really starting to become more well known for his Mindsight, which was based on internet what interpersonal neurobiology. My brain went wonky for a minute. So he was really pulling together a lot of neuroscience research and understanding how that interpersonal neurobiology was impacting and can make a difference in the psychotherapy world. And then so learning about mindsight, he did a lot of studying of the work of Alan Shore. If you're not familiar with Alan Shore's work, he did a ton of research on attachment and early right brain development and how that impacts us in our relationships and overall functioning, I would say. In fact, Alan Shore was I read one of his research articles in which he referred this was a game changer for me, in which he referred to attachment theory as emotion regulation theory. And I thought, oh my goodness, that is it. So take all of that, what we know about attachment theory, what we know about neuroscience, kind of pack that in with a little family systems work, and what a difference that makes, having that understanding when you're working with children. So that's what I want to talk about today, using a theoretical lens when you're working with children, and most specifically, how that is a game changer when you're working with children who've experienced trauma. From a play therapy standpoint, we know that play therapy is grounded in theory. Theory drives application and how children access those therapeutic powers of play to facilitate that change process. So, you want to make sure that you're grounding your play therapy work in a theoretical model. And one of the things that I hear all the time, this comes up a lot in Play Therapy Academy, which is my online consulting program for child and adolescent therapists who want to use play therapy and learn how to use it well. So we talk about this a lot in Play Therapy Academy. It comes up a lot in my trainings. I'm going to talk a little bit at the end about some trainings that I do have coming up, one of which is a live webinar working with children who've experienced trauma using play therapy. So I'll talk a little bit more about those at the end. And these things come up all the time, how do you make sure that you're grounding your work? How do you even choose? And if you're working with trauma, how do you know what play therapy model to use, especially if you want to use a neuroscience and attachment theory lens to work with children? So that's the topic for today. If you're joining me, I would love to know who's here. Post your name in the comments. Um, I'd love to know where you work, what population you work with, what theoretical model are you using, what questions do you have about working with children using play therapy, and specifically, kind of how do I know what model to choose? And so I'm Kathy Spooner. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. If you have not tuned into my live stream episodes in the past, I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapist supervisor here in the United States with about 30 years experience in the mental health field, working with children, adolescents, and families. And prior to that was did some other work with children, adolescents, and families. So overall, I've been in the field almost, not quite, almost 40 years working with this population. Um, and so I go live every Wednesday at 7 a.m. Pacific time here in the US. I live stream into Instagram and I live stream into my Facebook group, which is called Play and Expressive Arts Therapy Playground. That is for child and adolescent therapists who want to use play therapy and expressive arts. So if you're on Facebook and you're interested in being part of my Facebook group, then pop over there and you can join the group. It's free. You just have to make sure to answer all of the questions. Otherwise, you won't get access into the group. And I also live stream into my YouTube channel and LinkedIn. If you want to watch any of the replays after the broadcast will automatically generate a replay. Probably the easiest place to find all the replays is on my YouTube channel. You just check on the live tab and you can see all the replays there. You can find them in my Facebook group. I pin them in the featured section. On Instagram, you could probably find them in my grid. So let's get started. So let's see, got a couple of comments here from Estella. Estella from Indiana. I work in private practice. I tend to like using CBT, and I'm learning more about somatic therapy and IFS. And I think, especially when you're working with trauma, Estella, those models, integrating those into play therapy can be a really phenomenal way to help children with trauma, especially some complex trauma. And I would even add that those modalities are really good, like when you're starting to work with more adolescents and using those theoretical models. So as I was thinking about, well, how do we ground this work in play therapy? And prescriptive play therapy, I think, is a really good theoretical model that you can use. It's not the only one. It is one that I'm trained in, so I will talk about that one. And I think those two modalities that you are learning more about, because I love those, would be a really good fit. Also, good morning, Steph. Hey, Steph, how are you? Hi, everyone. I'm a CPC intern. So those of you outside of Nevada, CPC means clinical professional counselor in the Las Vegas area. Favorite population? Oh, adolescents. Cool. That's awesome, Steph. So let's get started. Okay, so first, a little disclosure. Some of you, if you've been on my previous live streams, you will know that I have two dogs. And I do live stream from my home office, which is where you see all these amazing Santray miniatures behind me. So when my husband leaves for work in the morning, my dogs come and join me. So what happens though is they dig in the carpet. Like now, Lily is walking. She's my little dog. You probably saw her in some previous live episodes. Anyways, Lily is kind of walking around panting and digging. So if you hear any really weird noise in the background, it is my crazy dogs digging and panting because they like to be with their people. All right, so let's get started. We have Estella says, great, I look forward to incorporating that into my play therapy with, oh yeah, younger clients. That's awesome. And then we have Freya from Bristol, UK. Hey, Freya. Just qualified as a play therapist from Master's in Play Therapy course. I think that's MS, Master's training and placement in child-centered play therapy. And I would say my default is most definitely child-centered play therapy. And I'm going to talk about from a prescriptive play therapy standpoint what that kind of means as well. And we have Esther from England, work in private practice. I'm a British Association for Play Therapy registered play therapist trained in child-centered play therapy and sand story. That's awesome. And those are really awesome modalities. I'm not trained in sand story. I'm kind of intrigued by it. I hear a lot about that. I think that's kind of popular over there in the UK. So I am interested. Oh my goodness, you can hear Lily. She's scratching. Pardon the scratching. Alrighty, so let's get started. So using a neuroscience lens. Oh, Lily. Oh my goodness. Anyways, don't mind my dog. So just a couple of things to think about when you're using play therapy. And if you've been using play therapy and you're working with children and adolescents, the likelihood you have kids on your caseload who've experienced trauma is pretty high. And one of the things that I get asked a lot, especially I've been doing play therapy consultation and supervision for about 15 years now. And one of the things that comes up a lot is some concern when working with children who've experienced trauma, some concern about how do you help them and how do you know if your treatment model is working, how do you know what to do, what happens if they start dissociating in their play, how do you know what's going on with them. All of these questions come up a lot because play therapists are really concerned about not being able to help children with trauma and making it worse. And so there are a couple of things I think are important to think about when you're figuring out what type of model you want to use to help children and adolescents when you're using play therapy. So just a couple of things to think about would be first of all, what's the age of the child? So some play therapy models work better with certain ages than others. And you're about to notice my bias. So again, others may view things differently. What I've noticed in the last 30 years in mental health, in the last 15, doing consultation for play therapy, really, there are certain models, not across the board, but there are certain models that I tend to see work better with certain ages than others. For example, I'm trained, my foundation is child-centered play therapy. That's the model I learned 20 years ago for play therapy and learned how to implement that one. It's been my experience that model works well with 8 years old and under. And when I'm working with children who are much younger, like 3 or 4 or even 7 or 8, I'm typically going to be using child-centered play therapy because it's been my experience that modality works well. If you're using CBT, this is my experience that CBT, because you're you're trying to help them identify cognitions and connect thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It's a little more cognitive. So that tends to work, in my experience, better with a little older, like 9 and older is typically what I do. So, and then there are some models I think work well across the age spectrum, like Gestalt play therapy or Adlerian play therapy. Um, Jungian play therapy, you can probably adjust that one as well. So different models, you want to consider what is the age of the child. And the second thing you want to think about is what what's the severity, intensity, and duration of the symptoms? Because you're looking at the age. You also have to think about the setting that you're working in and the severity of the issues, because private practice may not be effective for some kids who have some more serious trauma experiences that have more severely impacted their daily functioning. They may need a higher level of care than an outpatient private practice type of setting. They may need more intensive services in the home, more intensive services to support parents. Some children may need more residential. So typically we try all those other modalities first. We try to keep children in the home and in the community as best as we can. And there are some children who do need a much higher level of support and structure that can be provided on an outpatient basis or even in the community. So you want to think about the severity, duration, and intensity of the symptoms, and that you're going to be gathering from your thorough assessment. So hopefully in the beginning, and especially if you've heard some of my previous live streams when I talk about case conceptualization and the importance of case conceptualization, if that's a topic you're interested in, then you definitely want to hop over there to my YouTube channel and watch one of those, because that's going to play into your treatment planning. And if you're interested in treatment planning, I have some other live stream episodes about that one as well. I'll also talk a little, I have some courses on those as well. And as you're thinking about what play therapy to model to use, what treatment approach do you need to use, you want to think about the age of the child and the impact of the trauma, symptom, severity, intensity, and duration. You also want to think about caregiver capacity to help facilitate healing with the trauma. And then the third thing you want to think about is what models are you trained in? So, as I mentioned previously, your play therapy theoretical model is going to drive application, and that's how your theoretical model determines how your clients are going to access those therapeutic powers of play and what that looks like. And so, for example, child-centered play therapy is a much different modality than, let's say, cognitive behavioral therapy or even Adlerian therapy, or somatic experiencing or EMDR. These are all theoretical models, and the models have certain ways in which you engage with your client. How do you establish therapeutic rapport? How do you understand what's going on? What are the roots of the problem? All that's your case conceptualization that's based on your theoretical model. And your theoretical model then is going to be one that you're trained to use so that you know how to apply it. So when you do your case conceptualization and that now is informing your treatment planning. Your treatment planning is, what model am I going to use and how am I going to use it? So you need to know how to use it. So you want to think about those. What models are you trained in to use, and how are those going to help your client based on what's going on with your client? And so thinking about that and thinking about play therapy is one of the things I was thinking about in terms of how do you ground if you're how do you ground your neuroscience and attachment theoretical lens in play therapy? And I personally think that child-centered play therapy aligns really well with attachment theory and kind of understanding things from a neurobiological standpoint. I'm still going to apply child-centered play therapy the way child-centered play therapy is designed to be applied, but I'm also, because I love neuroscience and attachment, I kind of look at it that way. That being said, we know from lots and lots of research that um, that neuroscience and attachment theory are are becoming one of the kind of go-to, I would say, ways of understanding. And so I'm actually going to skip to that one right now. I was going to do prescriptive play therapy next, but I'll jump to integrating neuroscience and attachment. So we know because of all the research on neurobiology and attachment theory and interpersonal neurobiology and polyvagal and all of these all of the research that's been done, especially as it relates to trauma, we know that these are really helpful ways to understand what's going on with our clients, and using interventions that are based in neuroscience and attachment can be very helpful for our clients because it's been based on decades of research. So at this point, I would say this, we think about evidence-based practice. I would say neuroscience and attachment theory have become an evidence-based way to approach trauma in children and adolescents. So then the question is, we don't really have a theoretical model for play therapy. They're beginning to become developed. I think we're finding more and more um, professionals in the community who are developing models using neuroscience and attachment. So I think this is the next up and coming wave. That being said, grounding them in play therapy is an intentional theory based approach. And prescriptive play therapy has been around for several decades and is considered one of the seminal theories for the Association for Play Therapy. So, prescriptive play therapy can be a way to ground your neuroscience and attachment theoretical lens in a play therapy model, because again, remember, the play therapy model is going to dictate how you apply it in real time with your clients. You work through all of the stages of the change process from beginning to end. And how do you show up in the play therapy room? How do you build that theoretical rapport? How do you interact? What do you say? What do you not say? All of these are based on your play therapy model. So, to me, prescriptive play therapy can be a really effective way to bring all of these different research informed ways of understanding trauma and how to help children and adolescents overcome trauma. So there are some. So what is prescriptive play therapy? If you've not heard of prescriptive play therapy before, it was primarily developed by Dr. Charles Schaefer, and he worked with Heidi Kadison. There were some other play therapists in the early days developing this model. And so prescriptive play therapy is more of a directive approach that's tailored to the specific needs of each client. And so the idea is, from a prescriptive play therapy approach, you're going to be kind of co collaborating with your clients and parents about which interventions are going to be the most useful. And so you're using your clinical decision making skills. This is your assessment early on, that case conceptualization, to identify the child's needs. You're looking at developmental stage, you're looking at personality, you're looking at family system, and case conceptualization is really identifying what exactly is going on. So, and I would say for trauma, how has the trauma impacted this specific child and family system? How is the family system responding to the traumatic event that occurred? Sometimes only one child in the family system has been impacted. Sometimes the whole family has been impacted. And so you want to make sure you're identifying the systemic issues as well. You're looking at culture. How does culture play a role in what is going on with your client? As well as you're looking at those resiliency factors of culture, because these are going to be things you want to build upon to develop that resiliency and that healing process. So you're looking at all of these things when you're thinking about an intervention. And so from a prescriptive play therapy approach, there are specific tenets, principles of prescriptive play therapy. And one of those is differential therapeutics. So what is differential therapeutics? It's essentially that understanding that one size doesn't fit all, that some children may respond better to an intervention than other children. So you want to think about what specific models you're trained to use and which of those models would be more effective for each of your clients. The other thing you're considering with prescriptive play therapy is it's eclectic or trans theoretical, meaning as a play therapist, you are cultivating a variety of methodologies and techniques that that strengthen the interventions and broaden your scope of practice. So this is where you are building that toolbox of different approaches. Like we heard Estella was talking about CBT, somatic experiencing, and somatic therapy, somatic experiencing, and internal family systems. These, if you're trained in these models from a prescriptive play therapy approach, you understand the lens in which that theoretical model understands what the problem is, and then how do you apply these specific models. And these are all in your toolbox, so you're now understanding how to use those. And so the third thing you think about for prescriptive play therapy is that it's integrative. It's combining theories and techniques to strengthen the interventions. And the thing you want to think about here is, and I see this happen. So the caution I would say, if you're thinking about, if you really want to understand prescriptive play therapy is not throw a bunch of interventions at your client and see which one sticks. It's a lot like throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks to the wall. That's not what prescriptive play therapy is. And I see this a lot. This is probably one of the things people struggle with a lot in the beginning is, and we talk about this a lot in Play Therapy Academy. A lot of times what'll happen is I'm just going to kind of go on the fly and try something out. And if it doesn't work, I'll just try the next thing. And if that doesn't work, I'll try the next thing. It's not that. It's much more intentional and making sure that you're thinking about the model you've been trained in and how that will help your client, and you're inviting client into the change process. So you want to make sure that you give the intervention enough time to actually bring about the impact. Like you may use several different approaches and combine them in an integrative way, but you're doing that with intention and not so much, oh, let me just see what works from week to week and I'll just throw something in the playroom and put it together. That's not what it is. You're really much more intentional about the process. And then the final thing to think about with prescriptive play therapy is what they call prescriptive matching. So you're taking what you know about trauma, about interventions that have been developed specifically to address trauma. How are those applied? And will that fit the trauma mode? If you're using prescriptive play therapy for like a 10-year-old who's experiencing trauma or divorce or even depression or some emotion regulation problems, you're making sure that you're thinking about some evidence-based approaches for that specific disorder, and then you're matching the intervention with the specific problem that your client is experiencing. So in trauma work with children, what are some specific models that have been researched? And we know neuroscience and attachment theory have been heavily researched to better understand trauma and how to help children who've experienced trauma. There are now some models that have been developed over the last 15 years to work effectively with people who've experienced trauma. And so you can use prescriptive play therapy to integrate those models in. So that is it for today. We had a couple other comments. So we have Sarah Monroe from the UK, play therapist and trauma trainer. Welcome. Betty Skeet. Betty and I connected on LinkedIn. Hi, Betty. It's nice to see you here. Well, kind of see you. Working from Kendal in the UK. I'm a BAPT registered play therapist and filial therapy, working long-term with children that have experienced developmental trauma. That's awesome. Yeah. So just a recap for today. What are some things to think about when you're thinking about your approach and what you want to work? How do you want to help your client? You want to think about things like what's the age of the child, the symptoms, and what play therapy models you've been trained to use. And I would even say, what models have you been trained to use, and how can you use that with a prescriptive approach in play therapy? So some of the adult-oriented trauma models, how will you use those in play therapy and integrate those into play therapy using a theoretical model? And that we know after decades of research that neuroscience and attachment theory using that lens to address trauma can be very, very useful to helping you understand and conceptualize what's going on with your client. Why is it happening? And then which trauma models can be useful for your specific client based on age, severity, developmental needs, because some children may be chronologically 10, they may be socially, emotionally more like a 7-year-old. So you want to take those into consideration as well. And then the third thing is using a prescriptive play therapy model. Prescriptive play therapy is grounded in a theoretical model that drives the application of how you help your clients access those therapeutic powers of play. It's an intentional, integrative, and eclectic approach where you're specifically matching an intervention with each client based on those factors that we mentioned previously. So that is it for today. If you're interested, I do have some trainings coming up. I have a live webinar coming up in September, play therapy with traumatized children and teens. That one I do use a neuroscience and attachment lens, kind of looking at what you need to go, like each stage of treatment using play therapy, some interventions that you can use in each phase, what you want to consider, lots of experiential activities, lots of reviewing of neuroscience and attachment. So if you're interested in that, you can pop over to my website and register for that one. It's coming up in February. That one is a live webinar. So if you're interested, my website is rhplaytherapytraining.com. You want to click on the courses page, and we'll put a link in the comments below. So if you want to just click on the link and hop over there and check it out, you can do that. I do have some other courses. These are some foundational play therapy courses. Getting grounded in play therapy foundations, getting grounded in play therapy case conceptualization, and the newest course that I have coming out in that series is getting grounded in play therapy treatment planning. So really taking that case conceptualization and going through the treatment planning process to then be able to write a treatment plan that's actually meaningful and can help you get really good results. So it ties in really well. That course kind of really ties in really well when you're thinking about using using a play therapy approach to address trauma and using that prescriptive approach. You really want to make sure you're doing that case conceptualization, and then that's going to influence your treatment planning. Treatment planning and writing treatment plans are two different steps. You need to do the treatment planning process first, and that will help you write that treatment plan much more quickly, much less painfully, and actually get one that's meaningful. And then I also, if you're interested, I have Play Therapy Academy. Play Therapy Academy is an online play therapy case consultation program. We meet twice a month and do case presentations and identify themes in play and what stage of change, making sure interventions and application of the theory model are being done, kind of giving support, moral support as well, overcoming that imposter syndrome. So if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy, you can pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com on the supervision page, and you can find out more. You can schedule a free 30-minute phone call to video call so we can talk about what it is and see if it fits for you. And we'll put a link to all of these in the comments below. So you'll find a link to Play Therapy Academy. You'll find a link to the training on play therapy with traumatized children and teens. And you'll also see the links to the Getting Grounded in Play Therapy treatment planning, and also Getting Grounded in Play Therapy case conceptualization. So you can check out the courses page, see if there's something on there that would support you in your professional journey. So that is it for today. So the links are in the comments below, so you can check on those. And I will see you next time. Bye for now. Oops.